All right, thank you so much for staying with the Monday Report. You're just in time for the town hall session. We're talking about the Maraga succession. The hashtag is Monday Report at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. We'd like to know from you, what do you remember him for? Now that at the clock of midnight in the next 2 hours, he shall officially retire. He's handed over the rules, the instruments of power earlier on today. Let me introduce my guest to you real quick. Harriet Chigai is joining us now. She's a former LSK Vice President. Thank you so much for making time. On the right is Okiya Omtata, Executive Director, Kenyans for Justice and Development. Thank you for making time. And Charles Kanjama, Advocate of the High Court. Asante for making time this evening. Kanjama, I'll start with you. How would you sum up Maraga's legacy?
I think it's been a mixed legacy, which is true of most people. We've had periods where he showed very robustly the role of the judiciary in a transformational constitution, most critically at the time when Justice Maraga led his colleagues in the Supreme Court in overturning the election decision of IEBC in 2017, or the election declaration. We have also seen moments when he has seemed fallen, solitary, left alone, and frustrated at the lack of support from the executive, with his famous press briefings where he complained about the failure to appoint the 41 judges, and now there are 41 of them passed on, where he complained about judiciary budget being withdrawn. We've seen moments where he has engaged the executive head-on, like engaging the President Uhuru Kenyatta, telling, I'm not here to compete with you, my role is in the judiciary, your role is somewhere else. So we've seen him in the last 2 years especially, launching numerous court buildings all over the country and setting a very strong foundation for the infrastructural future of the judiciary. So you could say there's been a mixed bag. I personally think that he has been a strong Chief Justice, but the judiciary has also suffered a number of weaknesses. And right now, I think one of the largest weaknesses is the perception of less independence of the judiciary, less autonomy, less strength in relation to the other arms of government.
Okay, we'll come back to this issue of being less independent and find out whether there was any way you would have changed that. But Harriet, I'd like to hear your views on this. What would you sum up Maraga's legacy to be?
Thank you very much. First, let me congratulate the Chief Justice for exiting office, and I would say honorably. And we must acknowledge the fact that he took the mantle at a time when the democracy of this country was highly challenged. Just like Kanjama has mentioned, the election petition at that particular time, that particular ruling that was put at that particular period put Kenya at a good pedestal when it comes to democracy. And even after that, we saw quite a number of cases, decisions by the court, which supported the independence of the judiciary. The question whether those particular judgments and decisions or rulings were adhered to by the executive is something else. But we have to acknowledge the fact that there was a leverage in terms of giving other judges and magistrates that courage to actually put in place certain judgments and rulings, which ideally previously were unheard of. I would say in terms of democracy, he got a tick on that. In terms of articulating issues that affect the common mwananchi, access to justice, we've seen his rallying call in terms of accelerating backlog of cases. He moved forward and ensured that mediation, as we speak right now, has been highly taken up by the courts. So it's mixed in terms of his performance, in terms of strategic obligations when it comes to his administrative duties. I think he scored highly on that because as we speak right now, when we speak about access to justice, when we speak about use of ICT, you know, and technology in terms of moving or putting the legal fraternity into the e-platform.
Yeah.
I think he has scored. Whether it is working 100%, that is another question that we need to answer. But you'll realize that there have been transformative changes within the judiciary.
Okay.
When it comes to the political element, in terms of how you balance politics and the work at the judiciary, I think we had a very weak link there, and we have seen quite a number of situations whereby there has been a lot of friction between judiciary and the executive.
Yeah.
And by that reason, his leaving office having looked like his performance matrix is a bit on the low, but ideally, if you review his work performance in terms of the strategic obligation of his office, I highly think he has performed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okia, Chigai is speaking about access to justice. You've been in the corridors of justice a lot. Has anything changed in the reign of Maraga?
Well, first of all, let me also congratulate Mr. Maraga for having served his term. At least he was not removed through impeachment. He served his term, which means he was found credible to the end.
Yeah.
And like everybody, you have your strong points and your weak points. And on my part, I must say that he surprised me. I didn't expect much of him. Because for a man who grows to old age, and you never hear him having stood up for anything, he was just a middle-level, a judge who cruised the middle.
Yeah.
He never stuck out his neck when everybody was taking out his neck for his country. There was a time when this country was going to the dogs. And people in various sectors stood up and made a statement about it. He's among those people who kept quiet. So I did not expect much of him. You remember when he came in, he returned the red robes and the wigs, which former Chief Justice Mutunga had done away with. That was also a statement in itself of saying that we are going back to things as they used to be. And I didn't expect much, but so far I think what he has done, yes, he did something much, and on a scale of 10, I would give him a 6 that he performed. And in among the areas I think he performed for me is, as my friend Land Council Kanchama has said, standing up to the executive and fighting for the independence of the judiciary. He did well, and I would have given him an A, except I'm forced to give him a B, because he is under him that we began seeing judges being transferred on the basis of mainly their judgments. In fact, there's a matter personally I had to write a protest letter to him, protesting at an attempt to transfer judge who had given me some orders in a matter that involved the former Auditor General.
Yeah.
So you find that there's a requirement for a judge to spend at least, I think, 3 years or something in a station, but under Maraga you'd find that judges could be victimized based on the judgments they made, and they would be thrown outside Nairobi. And then there was the question of, as head of the Judicial Service Commission, I think the Judicial Service Commission, the Judicial Service Commission has not performed very well when it comes to in terms of recruiting high-caliber judicial officers.
Yeah.
I personally say that there has been a tendency, some of the judges and the magistrates who are recruited under him, if you looked at their history as advocates and whatever, you would find that some of them did not deserve those appointments. So you'd feel that the Judicial Service Commission did not do a good job of recruiting high-caliber judicial officers under Maraga, unlike it happened under his predecessor. There has been a lot of murmurs and complaints and what have you, which I think evidence is there, that under Justice Maraga there was an element of ethnicization in the judiciary. The Kisii factor became a bit very prominent under him, and you can look at the officers and see, and which I thought was, for me, a negative development. And then as somebody who reads a lot of the judgments that the Supreme Court makes, like the beautiful one they made today in terms of the rights of squatters, they made a very, very beautiful ruling that came out today, which I've read and I'm very impressed. But you'll find that under Justice Maraga, the Supreme Court jurisprudence has tended to be contradictory and therefore failing to set very clear precedents that can be followed. So you'd find that the judgments tend to be episodic. Every judgment is on its own, almost like. So that kind of, the kind of harmony, I would like to see like somebody playing a harp or listening to music, the symphony, has sort of in jurisprudence in the Supreme Court have been unable to place it well the way it was emerging under Mutunga.
Okay.
So I don't know whether it's because maybe the caliber of the judges who came in or not, I don't know. But one good thing that Maraga did that impressed me, there was a case that had been filed and was given a date over the last elections. Of course, after they nullified the presidential election, I think they surprised themselves and they ran away from their judgment. Because they gave orders that the servers be opened, and they never stood up to those orders. They still entertained the litigants who had disobeyed their orders and still gave them audience. From where I see it, they should not have entertained President Uhuru Kenyatta or the government in the Supreme Court until they obeyed their orders. And that would have helped us save standards. But where he surprised me and I liked it, there was a time when Harun Ndobe and I think it was Muslims for Human Rights and a group had filed a petition against the repeat elections, and it was to come up on a critical date. And all the members of all the Supreme Court judges chickened out. They didn't see it except for Mr. Maraga, Justice Maraga, and Justice Lenaola. All the others were Kilingia Mstuni. So when you get cowards in such a position, it's very painful. And that case could not be heard. And because it was not heard, we had the repeat elections the way they happened.
Because of lack of quorum.
Lack of quorum, So to me, I think he impressed me, and that's why I would rank him that way. So
you gave him a 6 out of 10?
I give him a 6 out of 10.
Kanjama, what is the disconnect here between judgment and orders? And that's a very important part that Okia is bringing up, whereby they give orders that this has to be done, it is not done, but the same litigants come back and file other cases.
Definitely one of the areas where the judiciary as a whole needs to improve is in the follow-through with court orders. And there is a lot of disobedience of court orders. There are court orders that are issued in ways in which they are easy to disregard. And I think it is a cancer, a rot that is spreading through the fabric of our governance structures. It's not just the executive that disregards court orders, even private individuals, private citizens. These days, as litigants, as somebody who goes to court often, pursuing rights for our clients, I can tell you one of the biggest challenges is just to enforce court orders, or to get court orders that are easily enforceable. And I think that has been a challenge. And I think in that sense, one of the things that Omtata says is quite correct, that the Supreme Court has to give the signal even to the other judges in the Court of Appeal, in the High Court and Special Courts, to the magistrates, that court orders are sacred and they will be obeyed. So if they follow through from the Supreme Court, if the ability to specify and concretize the orders is not very strong, then the signal goes to the other courts. I think there is something else which has been said which is quite true. And for some of us practitioners, sometimes we wonder how much candor to exhibit when talking about it. But it's the fact that the decisions of the Supreme Court as a whole, not taking one judgment or ruling here or there, but looking at them as a whole, have suffered from certain deficits. And I think Omtata has identified one as a deficit of inconsistency or episodic decision-making that doesn't seem to be part of a pattern. And I think there's also been a growing reliance of the Supreme Court, I'm sorry to say, on procedural technicalities to make the final determination in some of the important cases that go before them. This was one of the complaints that we, the people in the legal justice sector, had against the old Court of Appeal, the old Court of Appeal before the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And I have been monitoring or noting that you can see the first clues of the new Supreme Court beginning to develop the same kind of like instinct to dismiss some cases on procedural technicality that they may not need to. Allow me to say, Trevor, that the first and most important role of a Chief Justice in assessing his performance is his role as a judge. He is Chief Justice, and the first thing is that he's a justice. He's a justice of the apex court in Kenya. He's the president of the apex court, and that is the first way of assessing his legacy. And the second is, as the Chief Justice, he's the first among equals or as other judges, who is not meant to influence their jurisprudence directly by calling them and telling them decide this way or decide this other way, or maybe by transferring a judge who made a decision which was not very comfortable to the powers that be. But he has a way of signaling a strength to the other judicial officers by the way he comes out and defends their decisions, even if he may personally disagree with them, so long as they have been made with integrity and with a measure of competence. And I think there has been a feeling that in the last few years, the judges and magistrates have less autonomy than they had a few years ago. So I think that is an area where the next Chief Justice has to be very strong in ensuring that autonomy. So that's the first area for assessing the legacy of a Chief Justice. And then the second is his administrative role for the judiciary, as the chair of the Judicial Service Commission, as the chair of the National Council for Administration of Justice, as a head of an arm of government that is engaged in interaction with the other arms of government. And of course, we know there have also been challenges there that have boiled over into the public realm. And I think the current outcome of some of those TIFs that have been there has been unsatisfactory. And the judiciary has ended up, I'm not saying that the Chief Justice is to blame, but the outcome has ended up weakened on matters of budget, on matters of personnel, and so on. But we've seen the Chief Justice make a very strong effort to sustain the judiciary transformation that began with his predecessor through digitization, through trying to get additional judges, institutionalizing certain processes and procedures, coming up with new rules and so on. So I think overall he has a passing grade, and the question is now to assess the pros and the cons.
All right. Let me bring in what the people said in terms of the legacy of Maraga. This is what you had to say. We had asked you to send in your video comments and questions. Let's listen to some of them.
The world will always remember him for what he did. He tried his best to bring sanity in the judiciary despite the challenges he faced. For instance, the poor working relationship that he had with the executive. Of course, you remember the threats that had been given to the judiciary by the executive. And therefore, he worked in a very challenging environment, but he was still able to achieve some of the promises that he had made. And I am sure that the judiciary will miss his leadership, but then it is also a lesson to other Kenyans who would want to take up this position.
Suppose a judge who had earlier on retired, is he still allowed to come? Is he still allowed to apply for the position and be eligible for it? And my second question is, a current judge who is in office and heads a reputable position, what is the procedure for him to apply? Should he first withdraw from the current position and apply, or he can just go ahead and apply for the same position?
Maraga has defended the constitution, he has defended the judiciary, with everything, and I think he has done his part. And now all eyes are on who is going to be the next Chief Justice. And as Kenyans, we hope that politics is not going to play on the selection of the next CJ.
The outgoing CJ Maraga has done a very good job. We as citizens of Kenya, we should thank him, and we are expecting the incoming CJ to follow the suit. I hope Kenya will be a better country if we have a CJ who obeys and observes the rule.
If we does have an election dispute in 2022, what is it that the then Chief Justice will have to borrow from Chief Justice Maraga to be able to deliver an election verdict that it is fair and transparent and that it will not cause chaos in Kenya in 2022?
From the bottom of my heart, I would want to congratulate and sincerely thank Chief Justice Maraga for the far he has brought the judiciary. Please, Mr. Maraga, as you exit, continue supporting this arm of the government as an elder who is very, very wise. When you see them go astray, when you see that they need to be guided, please don't hesitate.
Maraga is the best Chief Justice Kenya has ever earned since independence. He has been a greatest defender of the Constitution. He has been fearless, candid, and he has not been a sycophant of the executive. He has done a great job. May he live long.
Maraga is a man of God. He stood for justice and what is right. He was always candid, and I believe that he'll go down in history as the best Chief Justice that this country has ever had. I wish him all the best as he proceeds on retirement.
We will miss you, Maraga.
What is the work of ombudsman in the BBI, and why is that there is people are really debating about that particular position that has been introduced, and is it going to affect or bring more changes in terms of changing our judiciary?
All kind words there to retired Chief Justice Maraga. Denita Gatti is a member of parliament, nominated a member of parliament. She says, we loved him and hated him in equal measure. Of course, his intention to dissolve parliament over failure to implement the 2/3 gender rule, a principled, committed man, friend of women. I wish him well and hope parliament passes the 2/3 gender rule to benefit women. The BBI has now come into the bridge to bridge this gap through endangering the electoral process. I really wish him well. All right. So, Chigai, do you think the dicey camaraderie between judiciary and executive is because Maraga lacked the soft skills to assert his authority and also relate to the other arms of government?
Well, yes and no. I would say for you to hold that particular position, first you must demonstrate that you're very steadfast, sober, and you hold a high ethical standard within the definitions that can be put in place for any public officer. Now, you'll find the friction between the judiciary and the executive, they completely went out of hand to an extent that the Chief Justice had to issue a press statement to Kenyans portraying his frustrations. You know, that already tells you that there was no room for negotiation. That also tells you the relationship between the judiciary and the AG's office, which would ideally have been the middle playing field when it comes to bringing the two institutions together, was also not there. And even if it was there, then it never worked. Whether it was an issue of soft skill or not, yes, no, I don't think so, because where there's a conflict, it takes two to tangle. Both parties must agree to come to the negotiating table.
So should the next CJ be looking to bridge that gap, or should you just continue with that tangent?
Definitely, and I say this with a lot of confidence because institutions must work together. Because where institutions are not able to work together, then you find yourselves in a situation where things are not moving. For instance, the discussions around revisiting the judiciary was loud. You know, it was not in harsh tones. It was very loud. And subsequent years, we actually saw a situation where the judiciary was completely stifled of even finances, you know. And when you talk of independence of institutions, when it comes to budgetary allocation and the power to make use of money comes in handy. And this is a situation whereby the judiciary could not move, it could not perform. Comparing the judiciary during the time or tenure of the Chief Justice Maraga and that of Mutunga, there's a whole big difference when it comes to financing. During Mutunga's time, they had enough money to run various programs. And you'll realize during Mutunga's time, the support came from each and every corner, including civil society. So the question then is, what happened in this particular one? Is it that institutions which supported the Mutunga tenure intentionally shied away from supporting the Maraga tenure? You know, those are questions we'll be asking ourselves. Is it that the taps were closed so tight that during this tenure nothing could move? And the answer is yes. Without money, you can do literally nothing. And that is one area that we hope, even as we bring on board the next Chief Justice, the judiciary and its institutional structure in terms of financial sustainability is one area that the next Chief Justice has to address. In fact, it should be priority number one. How can this particular institution be able to sit in and stand on its own footing for some time, despite the fact that government coffers are being held or they have not been disbursed in good time? So those are some of the issues that they need to be looked at and looked at keenly. And remember, for a very long time, we've been talking about the Judiciary Fund. You know, it's there in the in the legal statutes, but it has never been implemented to date. And those are some of the things that going forward, we need to have a judiciary that is able to stand by itself.
And you deem this was intentionally done?
Definitely, this was intentional. Oh yes, this was intentional. And give it to Maraga. He's walking away with a legacy within the African setup. He stands out as the first Chief Justice to annul an election.
Okay, so let me bring back Okia on this issue of corruption especially. Has the judiciary been able to deal with corruption both internally and externally? Because we've seen a situation where people say that yes, Maraga was a man of God, stood by the rule of law, but there was still corruption. Has it improved over the time when he was there?
It is said that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So I think one thing I must celebrate about Maraga, that he was a humble man. I cannot doubt his Christianity. He was a humble man and an admirable man. A man I would like to have an uncle, you see. So to me, as a human being, I think I cannot fault anything about the Chief Justice. In terms of corruption, is a law enforcement mechanism, and the Judicial Service Commission, really, which the Chief Justice heads, is the one that is supposed to be addressing that thing as a group. And I would say that if you look at some of the people in the Judicial Service Commission, are criminals, thugs. Outright thugs. I will not name them, but they're outright thugs. So when you have those kind of people to work with, they will take away the shine. And so I think the problem with the corruption in the judiciary is the Judicial Service Commission. We need to clean it up. And on that particular issue, I will not fault Maraga on that particular issue, personally. But I can only say that under his reign, I think the ugly head of corruption has reared its head.
Yeah.
And much as it's blame should go to the commission, he was the Chief Justice. He takes the blame for the corruption. And the corruption also comes in the lowering of standards and especially in the recruitment of judges.
Yeah.
And these are some things that you just say that you see a struggling advocate gets appointed a judge. He has been living in some of these nondescript addresses in Nairobi. And then within a year, he has moved to Karen. Then you begin wondering, how did it happen? What's the magic? And you know what the salary of a judge is? They can't afford that, you see. So how do they afford all these heavy lifestyles? You see. So some of these things are so obvious that you need to come and ask and say, I personally do not have any hard evidence on any judge being corrupt or anything.
Yeah.
But this is circumstantial evidence that suggests that something is not add up, the arithmetic is not coming in. So for some slow thinkers and small brains like mine, we get mesmerized when we say, like they say, hustler leo, sonko kesho. You see, those kind of movements are material progress.
Yeah.
Underscore that kind of thing.
Okay.
But I think one of the things that is also helping now that I think that the judiciary is going digital, which is also part of the achievements of Maraga, but forced by Corona.
Yeah.
I don't think it was really intended, but when Corona came, we had to do things, and I think he reacted in real time.
Yeah.
And was able to keep the judiciary functioning when most other institutions were again in the total lockdown.
Okay.
So I think for that one, I think we appreciate him, and I think with the going digital,
yeah,
a lot of things will be ruled out, will be locked out.
Yeah.
It's some of the things that they used to contribute to corruption, like files disappearing, like things like those happening, and what have you. We may have a less of that.
How often does that happen in the corridors of justice?
Which one?
You've been there for a long time. Files that disappear, files that disappear here and there.
Kajama's fought more battles. Kajama was my advocate.
Yeah.
And my early big cases. You don't know, when you look at my drafting style and Kajama's drafting style.
Yeah.
Am I cheating, Kajama?
You're right.
We come a very long way with Charles.
Okay. So
I think he's better qualified to speak to that.
About the files that disappear.
Yeah. The only thing that I thought that could also be really, from where I stand,
yeah,
when I had my case on the Auditor General and it was generating a lot of hate, I got very annoyed when the Chief Justice called for the file before judgment. And so the judgment had to be adjourned. The judge told us, Justice Radido informed us that the judgment has been adjourned because the Chief Justice has taken the file. Yeah. Now you wonder why would the Chief Justice take a file when each judge is independent, you see. So if that interference with judges comes in,
yeah,
then that also contributes to corruption.
Okay.
Because the interference is to influence a decision, and so those kind of things come in. But what I would like to say is, yeah, that on the issue of independence of the judiciary, the culprit, the institution that must guarantee the independence of the judiciary is Parliament. Parliament must facilitate the judiciary.
Yeah.
First of all, through enacting legislation that set the judiciary free. Two, through budgetary allocations that meet the needs of the judiciary, so that we keep the judiciary as a sacrosanct institution. These people who are trying to kill the judiciary, that are revisiting the judiciary, that are doing whatever, don't know what will happen, because and the test of where of a discredited judiciary, yeah, is what happened in 2007, when people said we will not go to court, we'll resolve our issues through traditional means of conflict. Not conflict, but of generating conflict, so that the dominant group succeeds. Yeah. So the judiciary plays a very, very important role in this country. It should be facilitated. Even investors coming to invest in this country, yeah, would like to be assured that should there be a dispute, that we've got a judiciary that can resolve their disputes in real time, so that matters don't take forever. Expanding a number of judges, doing all those things. Parliament should do that, so that the judiciary, the workload on a single judge is reduced. Because if you go to a court today, I even wonder how they manage it. Well, those judges are superhuman beings sometimes. You find people sitting for almost, they've got a course list of 20, 30 cases on a daily basis. So the workload is too heavy on the judges. So that can also impact on the quality of work. And so the elephant in the room really where we speak is the executive and the legislature, which have failed in their mandate of operationalizing the judiciary, so that you don't have to look on the Chief Justice to be doing all these things. And maybe, given the way the executive behaved, if we had a less tactful Chief Justice, maybe things would have gone haywire. Because it would have required a head-on confrontation, which may not have been good for us. And so Maraga took some things, and as they say in my mother tongue, that when you bite your tongue, you cannot spit out all the blood. So he swallowed some blood on our behalf, and I think that was good for us.
All right. I have to take a quick break here on a Monday Report. When we come back, I'll take some of your feedback. I see a lot of them. Honorable Rosa Buyu says Maraga remained honest and true to his spiritual ideals and performed his duty with utmost honesty and boldness, even when the environment seemed aggressively hostile. I wish him well as he leaves office with his head high. That is the woman representative for Kisumu, Honorable Rosa Buyu. I see a lot of your feedback here. I'll read them in just a bit.